This program is sponsored by the Kavli Prize, which honors scientists for breakthroughs in astrophysics, nanoscience, and neuroscience that transform our understanding of the very big, the very small, and the very complex.
If you don't mind, I'd like to exchange my straitjacket for something in a 39 Norfolk. And there's a mysterious force out there in space that literally comes out of nowhere. It's a force that seems to be pushing the universe apart.
I found a microscopic needle in a 10-ton haystack.
There's a way through communication to bring the beauty of science to the rest of the world.
Millions of people from around the world know Alan Alda from his role as Hawkeye Pierce in MASH, one of the most popular television series of all time.
What is it that makes us human?
But those who are science enthusiasts know Alan from a different perspective. They know him as a man who has worked tirelessly to popularize science, to improve how it is communicated. And later on in this program, the Kavli Foundation will honor his achievements in that arena. Those achievements have been extraordinary, as has been his life. And with that, I am thrilled to welcome Alan Alda.
Hiya, Brian.
Hi, Alan. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's great to be talking to you, even virtually.
It's not every day that you come across a picture of a serious, pipe-smoking 2-year-old. And that was the point. Alan's father used the picture to publicize one of his shows. Robert Alda knew how to capture attention and pass that gift on to his son.
I was born when my father was a singer and straight man in burlesque. I have these vivid memories from the time I was 2.5, standing in the wings, watching the burlesque comics, the chorus girls, the strippers. I got a real education in theater. I got a very broad education when you think about it. That introduced me to show business, to communicating through that particular art. But I was always curious. I can remember as I grew up, I was very curious about how things worked. And all my life, I've read about science, but never studied it formally.
Did people encourage you in that? I mean, in the community that you're within, did people look at you and say, like, why are you doing the science stuff? You know, your impact is in the arts. Was there any kind of resistance, or is it encouraged?
No, but you know, I fell under the sway of of what C.P. Snow was talking about in the 50s.
In 1959, the British intellectual C.P. Snow published a much-discussed essay in which he argued that two distinct cultures had arisen, one devoted to science and the other to the arts.
When I was in high school, that's around the time he was writing that. And I thought I had to choose between an interest in science and an interest in the arts. And I quieted down on my interest in science. And it wasn't until I was maybe in my early 20s that I began to read Scientific American avidly. And I realized there was a whole other way of thinking. Not the difference between art and science, but the difference between non-science and science. Because art and science have a lot of similarities, I think. I think you agree with that.
Yeah, no, I totally do. Each is searching for a kind of truth. They're just undertaking the search in different and complementary ways is how I see it.
And they're both rigorous.
Yeah.
You know, it seems that you have a lot more latitude in art, but not every word will do in a poem. Not every note will do in a symphony. And in a performance, it can go sour with the slightest misspeaking or misinterpretation. And that is a different kind of rigor, but it's also rigor.
The rigor Allen applied to his art proved to be enormously successful. He starred in MASH, whose finale still holds the record for being the most watched television episode in American history.
And I can't say that I've loved you all either, but I've loved as many of you as I could.
On MASH, Allen earned Emmys for acting, writing, and directing. The paths he could pursue were endless. But one opportunity stood out among the rest.
Hi, I'm Alan Alda, about to launch what promises to be a challenging new adventure as host of Scientific American Frontiers.
Despite the energy Allen had put into his artistic career, his passion for science never abated. And Scientific American Frontiers offered the opportunity to combine that passion with his experience on television. Getting to know the people behind the science was a particular enticement.
I thought, this is great. I have a chance to interview them. I said I only wanted to do it if I could talk to them on camera so I could spend the day with them and find out about their work.
What were your childhood dreams? What do you mean by that?
I remember some books. A book I was reading as a child was a picture book, and it had this.
Allen hosted Scientific American Frontiers on PBS for 11 seasons, giving free rein to his unquenchable interest in science.
This device, this satellite, is picking up this cosmic background microwave radiation from way back in time.
Right.
From the beginning of the universe.
It's actually a direct picture of what the universe used to be like because it took that light all that time to get from there to the satellite.
Scientific American Frontiers allowed Allen to report on basic science, philosophical questions, and cutting-edge technology.
That's Dan Kemp on the table in there. Army veteran, quadriplegic, and as I think you'll see, a remarkable person. Dan is one of the people we'll be meeting in our first story, which is about something that scientists have been trying to do for at least 200 years, to control and manipulate the human body using electricity.
Allen, with so many interviews, having spoken with so many people during the time that you were host of Scientific American Frontiers, any of those encounters that really stand out as the most memorable of all?
You know, I'm very fond of the producers of that show, but they were trying to kill me for 11 years. Yeah, for instance, in one show, the producer said to me, "We have to climb up to the top of Mount Vesuvius." I said, "Why do we have to do that?" She said, "Well, there's a scientist up there with equipment, and she's monitoring the volcano." I said, "I don't think we should march up to the tip of a volcano." He said, "Why not?" I said, "Because the program we're doing is about how it could blow at any moment." He said, "Don't worry, that she has all this equipment. It tells her everything." So we walk all the way up to the top, and I sit down next to her.
This is the crater of the last eruption of Vesuvius.
And I said, "So how much does your equipment tell you?" She says, "Oh, not too much."
Oh, you want to do pull-ups? Oh, good.
But the most memorable experiences I've had, I think, are with animals. We were dealing with baby chimps who had been brought up in captivity, and they had to be trained how to live in the wild. So they were training them to do that. So I sat down next to this cute little guy. He looked like a 2-year-old human. And I said hello to him, and I was speaking nicely to him, and he reached up and gave me such a sock in the puss.
Oh, ouch.
That's not nice.
Ouch.
And then he held out his hand like this.
But now he's saying, "I'm sorry."
That's apparently a gesture they make to tell you they're sorry. I said, "Never mind the excuse. How about not doing it?"
And I'm keeping track of how you're thinking.
I was having a nice conversation with a scientist called Brian Hare, and he was telling me about chimps. And in the middle of the conversation, we were by a plate of glass next to where the chimps were living. And I don't know what it was about this huge chimp. He must have weighed 800 pounds. While we were talking, he just came by, and
They're political.
he just slammed against the glass like, I'm in charge here, not you. They all had that little attitude with me.
It's doing what?
It's biting the boat.
It's biting the boat.
And then they made me work with a shark.
You went into the water with shark?
We caught an 8-foot shark in an 11-foot rowboat.
Oh, boy, that's like, I'm playing the part of Richard Dreyfuss. Oh, was he busy today?
During his 11 seasons on Scientific American Frontiers, Alan interviewed hundreds of scientists about their work. But one scientist in particular had an unexpected and enduring impact.
We were having a very good connection. And something I said reminded her of a lecture she gave. And she had been talking to me, and she turned away from me and looked straight at the camera and started telling the camera her lecture. So I coaxed her back with some questions, and she came back to me. And when she came back to me, her tone was completely different. It was personal and connected. But then something reminded her of the lecture, and she turned back to the camera again, and the tone got cold and lecturish. She was in lecture mode. I realized something really important in that moment, how important it was to maintain that contact, and how I could develop ways of getting them back into that intimate connection.
Well, look, we as scientists, we're trained throughout most of our undergraduate, graduate education to strip away all the human elements of communication in order that the papers that we write have utter precision. And of course, natural language, when you're just talking back and forth, there's an interpretation, there's emotion, there's qualities that shade meaning, and we're trained to kind of get rid of all that stuff in order that there's precision in the literature. And so I totally understand how it can be that a scientist would turn in the midst of a conversation and lock back into the mode of discourse that we're trained. But presumably this must underlie the approach that you've developed to try to help scientists to kind of step outside the more traditional scientific training and communicate as human beings.
That's right. So I thought, as the show was ending, wouldn't it be a good idea if we could train scientists to make this connection with an audience without the need of somebody like me standing there helping them connect? And what if we did it by teaching them the same way I learned, which was through starting with improvisation?
Alan did some improvising of his own, devising an impromptu experiment with 20 engineering students at USC as proof of concept.
So when they came in, I asked them to talk about their work for 2 minutes, each one to talk to the other 19. And they were a little locked into lecture mode. Then we improvised for 2 hours, and I asked them to talk again. And it was amazing.
Alan was now convinced that training scientists in improv would vastly improve their communication skills. But his proposals to train them in an academic setting were met with skepticism until Stony Brook University signed on.
The reason we talk so much about and do so much improvising is that we've come to see that it's foundational, that there's something about the experience of improvising that opens you up to another person. When we started up, I began working with a group of scientists from Stony Brook, and we did 6 weeks of training.
And learned about lungs.
When she laughs, she's not laughing. Communication is a two-way street. If it's only one way, if it's just me telling you what I think I know, I'm spraying information at you. But I want to get you engaged. I want you to hear it. I want you to remember it. And what's so interesting is the scientists took to the improv exercises and games with as much enthusiasm as actors do. They gave themselves over to it.
And you find that those exercises then inform the way that they present science in a more ordinary setting, not in the class?
Yeah. Here's the thing. It may look silly to some people to see people mirroring each other, moving their arms together, or carrying a piece of plate glass. But the experience of making contact through these improv exercises gets you habituated to looking the other person in the eye, to picking up on their facial expressions, to sensing something about their tone of voice that communicates something to you, that actually has an effect on you and changes you in some way, makes you respond in a certain way.
Good evening.
As an alumna of Saturday Night Live and Chicago's famed Second City improvisational troupe, Tina Fey is one of the country's most skilled practitioners of improv.
One of the core ideas in improvisation is to agree, to say yes and, right? To agree is the yes, and then the and is to contribute something of your own. And it's something that once you get in the habit of doing it as an improviser, I don't know if you find the same thing, that it's just the way you think about things. And always shocked when if I meet someone in a work situation or someone who's starting from a place of no, like, well, I don't think we're going to be able to do that, or you're just like, oh, why would you start there?
And at the World Science Festival, Tina and Alan joined forces to deliver an essential message.
Tina is my mirror, and I'm looking into the mirror, and she has to be a true mirror, instantaneously doing what I'm doing as if she were a real mirror. There has to be no lag time. If I do that, she can't follow me. And this is the most interesting thing for scientists to understand, or anybody who's learning better communication from this exercise. This is fundamental. If I do this, she can't be my mirror. It's my job to help her follow me. So if I'm communicating to you and I want you to understand something and you don't follow me, I'm not helping you follow me.
And back at Stony Brook University, these ideas are taking root among the scientists Alan teaches.
The mirror exercise, that's a really great, there are so many great key ideas and concepts in there. I can foresee, sharing bad news. And in that context, you don't want to just lay the news on someone, on the patient, without, you really want to be very attuned to their reaction. And, that back and forth is so crucial.
Alan's efforts to improve science communication are aimed at making science more accessible, especially to kids.
Why is the sky blue?
Why is the sky blue? And it's harder than it sounds. I love the questions that are harder than they sound. When I was 11 years old, I was fascinated with flame. I didn't know what it was. So I asked a teacher, I said, what's a flame? And she thought for a second and said, oxidation. Now I had two things I didn't know the answer to.
But decades later, in an article for Science magazine, Alan raised the question again.
So I said to the scientists at the end of that article, how about a little contest where you explain to 11-year-olds what a flame is in ways that will engage them and help them understand. And the judges of the contest will be real 11-year-olds. Ellie's going to give the trophy to the winner of the 2012 World Science Festival Flame Challenge to
Ben Ames.
Ben Ames. Come on up, Ben. There he is.
And this is how Ben answered the question that Alan posed to his teachers years earlier.
Atoms. Everything is made up of billions and billions of atoms. Now this candle and flame, well, they are made up of three kinds of atoms: carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. The carbon and the hydrogen are locked together to form a solid waxen wick. The oxygen is a gas all around us. Normally, the oxygen doesn't do much to the candle. It just bounces off of the surface, not doing any real damage. But when we add heat, the oxygen atoms go bananas, and they shake the wax like crazy until finally, with enough force, they snap apart. They leave the candle as a gas, where they mix with the oxygen. Uh-oh, I smell trouble.
And it turned out to be such a wonderful thing. I mean, we got a lot of scientists joining in, and we did it for several years. Welcome to What is Sleep, which of course grew out of the Flame Challenge. Thanks so much. Thanks for coming. So the Flame Challenge this year has the question, what is time? This year's question, what is sound, has been answered by scientists all around the world. The kids were wonderful. The kids were able to say, they were in a power of strength, you know, a power of dignity with regard to these fancy scientists. They could say to them, you know, that explanation was very good, but it could be better.
What I enjoyed most about the Flame Challenge was just learning how flames are started, like with the atoms and stuff. And I also liked to hear different perspectives from all the scientists around the world.
And the scientists would try to get their attention by being funny and sometimes silly. And there was one kid who was great. He said, you know, it's one thing to be funny, but you don't have to be silly. We're 11, we're not 7. Hello.
Alan hosts panels at the World Science Festival on a wide range of topics beyond the Flame Challenge.
What if you could actually read another person's mind? Brain science has reached the point now, or is reaching it, where they have made amazing advances in the ability to see what's going on in someone else's mind.
The question is, do you think that there's something fundamental missing in the notion of quantum physics? What is it about altruism that's such a problem? How could it have threatened the theory of evolution?
Alan, at the World Science Festival, you have done a heroic job of hosting so many programs on such a wide range of sciences, which has always made me wonder, is there some area of science that you most enjoy having these on-stage conversations or demonstrations about?
You know, I love physics so much. I love the mystery of physics.
Einstein's law of time warp says that everything likes to live where it's going to age most slowly. And gravity pulls it there. And so you age more slowly if you're on the surface of the Earth than if you're at high altitude.
When it's a biologist, I love the biology.
Well, we have the longest childhood of any primate, right? Probably any
Absolutely. It takes 13 million calories to rear a human from birth to nutritional independence.
And I was through with them in the first year or two.
Alan has had extraordinary success as an actor, writer, producer, and as a teacher of science communication. And those skills converge in the theatrical productions he has written or produced about scientists.
I don't know if you remember, but you called me because you were playing Richard Feynman in QED, this wonderful play about the physicist Richard Feynman, and you were doing it out in Los Angeles, I think it was. And you called me up out of the blue and said, I have to say all these physics words in this show. I'd like to know what in the world they mean. And you and I discussed, quantum electrodynamics and the motion of photons reflecting off of glass and so forth. And then you invited me out to see the final performance in LA. So I flew out and saw it. And then we went out to dinner afterwards. And I figured we would just be chit-chatting about stuff. We stayed at the restaurant till like 2 in the morning. The waiters wanted to kick us out because you were continually asking me more and more questions about the physics. And it struck me as so wonderful and unexpected because your run as Richard Feynman was over. You didn't need to know the stuff for the show anymore. So it's just to say that it's such a genuine passion for science, and you discussed how sort of that came from, over the years, being enamored with some of these ideas. But this presumably is something you are as passionate about as you are about the other things that you've done in your life.
I am, and it's because to me it's the world's greatest detective story. It's also the greatest poetry. The way you folks have figured out how nature fits together its various parts, some of the parts that don't fit together, like the big world and the tiny, tiny, small world. So I'm afraid that every time we meet for dinner, you and I, you're home putting on your jacket saying, I hope he doesn't ask me about physics again tonight.
Not at all. Not at all. So that passion is also translated into other things that you've done, right? You've written plays about some of the great scientists. Dear Albert, where you took the correspondence of Albert Einstein and melded it all together into a wonderful onstage experience of Albert Einstein, Radiance. You wrote about Marie Curie. What was it about those characters in particular that pulled you in to the point that you would create these onstage works about them?
Well, I love the story of Marie Curie. She's my hero. Nothing stood in her way. And when things went against her, she didn't give up. She was a powerhouse.
I don't understand. Is there something about being a woman that requires invisibility?
And I really loved that about her. And I decided to write a play about her. And I was going to try to find all her letters and base it on her letters. And then I found out that every piece of paper she had come in contact with was still radioactive. So I switched to Einstein. So the Einstein letters were not radioactive, but full of juice.
Albert himself is refusing to take any decision. He is prepared to marry either me or Mama.
Then I went back to Marie because I realized I could tell her story without actually touching her papers. Although I went into her lab in Paris. Her lab has been turned into a place that you can visit. However, there's a piece of paper from her notebook from the day she discovered radium. And it's behind a glass frame. So the curator of the place opened up the frame on a hinge and held the Geiger counter up to the page, and it clicked like a tap dancer.
Really?
Yeah. So I took a step back from that.
Understandably.
But I loved tracing her steps in Paris. I walked as fast as I could from her lab to the place where she met her lover, to see how out of breath she'd be when she came in the room in the play.
She's brought formal charges against me. The police are investigating. They have the letters. It's a criminal charge.
What?
Marie picks up a newspaper.
Marie.
Consorting with a concubine in the marital dwelling. Concubine?
Apparently it's a crime.
Well, first of all, I'm not a concubine, and secondly, we never consorted in a marital dwelling.
Yes, well, by the time that's established, our lives will be destroyed. That's all she cares about now. The letters will probably be presented in evidence, and you'll probably have to give testimony.
This trial is set for December 8th.
Yes.
That's when I'm supposed to be in Stockholm, receiving the Nobel Prize.
Yes, please put the paper down, Marie.
It was really fun.
I mean, the fact that both Einstein and Marie Curie both had, how can one put it, fairly messy personal lives in some sense, at least as viewed from the outside, viewed from the public, was that an appealing aspect of both of these characters?
Yeah, very much so for me, because to me, it's very important that we understand that scientists are human. And one way to convince an audience that a great scientist wasn't just a fountainhead of greatness, but was also a person like them, is to let the story reveal some of the tragic mistakes they made in their lives. Einstein was kind of cruel to his first wife and a little bit infatuated with himself with regard to most women.
Dear Elsa, do you think it is so easy to get a divorce if one does not have any proof of the other party's guilt? On the other hand, I treat my wife as an employee whom I cannot fire.
So have you seen, actors and directors, those who are, from the arts community, get excited about the stories of science?
Boy, they sure were. When I asked actors to play in these plays that I wrote about Marie Curie and Einstein, they were so enthusiastic.
Russian woman is stealing.
And some of them came with a good background of basic understanding of some of the science, and all of them wanted to know more.
Why do you torment me so endlessly?
They were all enthusiastic about it. When I asked Paul Rudd if he would please play Einstein, and I know how busy he is, and I was giving him reasons why he might have fun and it would be a good thing to do, he said, "You had me at MC squared."
Explaining Einstein's most famous equation can be a daunting task, but understanding the science as well as the scientist is fundamental for Alan.
We thought it would be fun to spend a few minutes, just a few minutes, Brian Greene and I having a little conversation mostly about the science behind what was happening in his life.
And whether he's expressing curiosity, wonder, or skepticism, Alan is always the audience's most effective and relatable surrogate.
In any situation where there's gravity, if you don't want to have to deal with it directly, just execute a certain kind of motion. Jump out a window, and then gravity goes away.
What? You jump out the window, gravity makes a quick entrance.
Now, I can show you this thing. When I take off this cap, air pressure is going to be entering into the bottle, and water is going to spew out a few holes that I have here because gravity is going to pull down on the water. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to let the bottle go into free fall and watch that the water won't spray out any longer, right? So that's what you should look for. Okay, here we go. All right, right? So here goes the water. Oh, sorry about that, right? So now watch when I let it go.
Holy
Did you
moly!
see that, right? One more time.
Gravity goes away!
Right, see, there it is.
It's not just the audiences that find Alan relatable. So do the scientists.
We are really no longer in the realm of observations of good answers. We are really at the stage where we should ask good questions. And I think there's nobody better to ask these questions than Alan Alda.
Having achieved enormous success as a communicator in traditional media, Alan now has his sights set on communication in the digital world.
You know, one of the things I've noticed about you through the years is you're very forward-thinking when it comes to technology and the way that technology can change the way we communicate. I remember when I first got my first iPhone. I don't know, it was like the iPhone 1. You were up to the iPhone 1 million at that point. You were so far ahead of me. We actually had a conversation where you said to me, "What apps do you have?" And I was embarrassed that I did not know what an app was at that moment, so I just kind of mumbled something and turned away. So you're also right now at the cutting edge of this, explosion of podcasts, where you have Clear and Vivid. I've had the honor of being on your program.
Welcome to Clear and Vivid. This is the first in a series of live web shows where we'll be talking about the latest ideas in both science communication and health communication.
So what motivated you to embrace this new approach to getting ideas out there?
Well, partly it's another way for me to talk to smart people, not only about science, but about pretty much every subject, as long as it relates in some way to communication and relating. And I've talked to such a wonderful bunch of people. There are 120 or 130 podcasts now I've done. It's interesting with the podcast. I'm often talking to somebody who's a Nobel Prize winner or a great artist, and I might have 10 things that I'm curious about that I want to find out from them, but I don't have specific questions. First of all, it's so interesting that bacteria evolved the ability to fend off a virus. These little guys had this sophisticated tool to do it. How did you figure out that would somehow be useful to humans?
Well, let's go back to where this all began, because it really started with a few microbiologists, people that study bacteria, wondering how it is that bacteria are able to defend themselves from viruses.
Whatever they say to me lights me up, makes me want to know more. And you can rely more on that than you can on a stiff, formalized set of questions. What do you wish you really understood?
I really wish I understood human behavior. I think I'd be a much better person, a much better leader. I definitely would have been a much better wife.
Though Alan has explored the cutting edge of science for decades, it's his home life that keeps him grounded. He's been married for 63 years to the musician, author, and photographer Arlene Alda. He is a father and a grandfather who relishes both of those roles. And when Alan prepares for a science panel, his kids are happy to help out.
Hello, thank you. You know, I was at my computer this morning trying to get up to speed for tonight. And an email popped up on my screen from my daughter Eve. And it required a long answer. And I said, I just shot back an answer quickly, and I said, I can't answer you right now. I'm trying to learn everything that is known about black holes in the next 2 hours. So, being my daughter, she shot back an answer to me, and she said, you need the whole 2 hours? So then she laid it out for me. 1, there are areas of space that suck everything into them. 2, you don't want to get near a black hole. 3, some people are like black holes. They suck everyone around them into their vortex.
Alan's life is not without its challenges. On a remote mountain in Chile, he faced a life-threatening medical emergency.
They slid me in the ambulance. I'm screaming in pain. Take me an hour and a half down a bumpy mountain road to this little hospital where there's this brilliant surgeon who knew exactly what was wrong with me. It wasn't my appendix at all. It was about a yard of my intestine that had been all crimped up and lost its blood supply. And within a couple of hours, it was going to be dead, and so was I. But this was the communication. This was so wonderful. He leaned over so he could see my face, and I could see his face, and I could still see his eyes through his rimless glasses. And he said, here's what's happened. Some of your intestine has gone bad, and we have to cut out the bad part and sew the 2 good ends together. And I said, oh, you're going to do an end-to-end anastomosis. He said, how do you know that? I said, oh, I did many of them on MASH.
But whatever challenges Alan faces, he does so with the grace and optimism his fans have come to love.
I haven't said in public until now that I've been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. And the reason that I want to talk about it in public is that I was diagnosed 3.5 years ago, and I've had a full life since then.
So you've also been quite public, you know, with the news of your own diagnosis with Parkinson's. How has that changed your outlook? Has it had an impact on the way the work that you do and the outlook that you have?
No, not much. Well, I'm pretty soon going to be at the point where I probably will only play people with Parkinson's as an actor. But the podcast is still open to me, and I love it. I have as much fun doing that as I do acting. Writing is still open to me, although when I write, Dr. Parkinson hits keys that I don't want him to. So it's a collaboration between me and the good doctor.
The joy Alan takes in learning about science and the efforts he has made to make science accessible have earned him the respect and admiration of scientists around the world. And that is particularly true of the scientists who run the Kavli Foundation. Today, Bob Kahn, the foundation's recently retired president, is here to make a very special announcement.
Thanks, Brian, and great to see you. How are you, Alan? Wonderful to see you virtually in person, so to speak.
I'm great, thank you.
Alan, and you've been a constant partner with us. You've co-hosted the Kavli Prize ceremony in Oslo since 2010.
Once again, it's a pleasure to welcome you to this great ceremony.
You've allowed us to partner with you for a decade or more as you built the Alda Center for Communicating Science, helping scientists better communicate what they do, helping connect society with the joys of science. And as a scientist, I can tell you it is a joy. And while we can add numerous examples, I just want to say this. We share a common belief with you in the societal benefits derived from curiosity-driven basic scientific research. And we're all the beneficiaries from your commitment to that message. So for your immeasurable contributions to science and science communications, the Kavli Foundation is honored to present to you the first ever distinguished Kavli Science Communicator Medal. And I want to hold it up here so you can see it. It looks just like the many Kavli Prize medals you've seen in Oslo, but it's dedicated to you as a special medal for all the work you have done.
That's amazing. Thank you. The support you've given the Alda Center over the last 10 years, the advice you've given us, the encouragement, the funding has helped us enable the amazing staff and teaching staff at the Alda Center to train scientists all over the world. That would have been enough, genug.
Yes.
But you've topped it now, and this will be such an honor that goes to the people who make the Alda Center so brilliant. And I'm so grateful, and I'm grateful for your help with Clear and Vivid and Science Clear and Vivid, 2 podcasts that we've been working on together. It's just great. The Kavli Foundation has done so much good in the world. And I'm really honored to be among the people who have benefited from your insight and your intelligence and your forward-looking programs. Thank you so much, Bob.
Oh, you're most welcome, Alan. We couldn't be more pleased that you're the first recipient of this special kind of recognition. So maybe I'll say thanks to Brian and Alan. It's been great to see you again, and I'll see you soon.
See you soon, Bob. Thank you so much.
So, Alan, congratulations. How do you feel about this award?
Oh, I think stunned is the word. Wow.
You know, one of your other subjects in the podcast was, what makes people happy? And so, a natural question is just turn it back to you. When you think about all the things that you've done throughout your life and you imagine the things that you're still going to do going forward, what does give you the greatest sense of happiness?
I don't know. It's hard to say what the greatest sense of happiness is for me, but I do know there are things that make me very happy and very content. One is to do what I know how to do well. That makes me feel really good. And along those lines, to learn how to do it better feels even better. Seeing the relationships I have, the love I have with my wife, my children, my grandchildren, to see that working, to see us making the kind of connection we talked about at the beginning of our conversation, effortlessly, makes me very happy. Makes me happy to be able to deal with reality. In the Marie Curie play I wrote, Marie says something that I wrote for her. She didn't say it in real life. But when the person who loves her, when it's not working and she has to let him go, and he can't take it, and she says,
but reality, as it turns out, is something else.
I can't accept this. I won't.
It's just reality, Paul.
Paul, it's just reality. I operate on that idea. Reality is our friend. That's one of the reasons I'm so enthralled by science, because the more I can understand about the reality of nature, the more comfortable I'll be. And I know that part of the reality is I'll never know everything. No, humanity will never know everything. So I'm not hoping for a conclusion to this search, but I love the reality of the fact that in spite of the fact that we're never going to get there, we keep searching. That's us, and that's fun.
Well, you certainly have, over the course of many years, enhanced the reality of many people. Those who have enjoyed watching you in television and in film, on the stage, and those of us in science who have certainly enjoyed all of those activities, but so greatly appreciate what you have done to elevate the discourse in the field. So I thank you for all of those activities. I congratulate you on this prize from the Kavli Foundation, and I thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Brian.
What's playing on PBS? I'll tell you what's playing on PBS. Science show hosted by a guy who won't allow the use of obfuscational terminology that sounds like it otherwise might be BS. That's what's playing on PBS.
What's happening at Stony Brook? I'll tell you what's happening at Stony Brook. Improvisational acting for young scientists, for when they talk about what they're doing, they don't use inscrutable words or even so much as a phony look. That's what's happening at Stony Brook.
What's going on at the gala? I'll tell you what's going on at the gala. Guy being honored for making sure that scientific concepts get communicated clearly, even though he has a voice that sounds something like a sailor. That's what's going on at the gala.
Science is the thing that he holds dear, oh, and that's why Alan Alda is our hero. Yes, it's good old insatiable Alan. Alan Alda's got the right stuff. If a smarty pants starts using jargon and guff, Alda's there to clarify by calling his bluff. Yes, it's good old insatiable Alan, and he's known from here to Bangkok as the oldest respected science explaining nice guy in New York. There are complex concepts everywhere, everywhere. There are complex concepts everywhere. Yes, but knowledge, so says Alda, is for every guy and doll to share. If I only had a ticket to the World Science Fair. It's festival, it's festival, it's festival.
I had no idea.